idea what I'm going to say.
You're going the wrong way too, just FYI. It's 3, 2, 1, and then you start. You don't count 1, 2, 3.
That's a good point. And I think that'll be the beginning, guys. If you missed it, I was counting. I went 1, 2, 3 instead of 3, 2, 1. And that's how we're going to start the show with a little background scene on how we don't have everything put together. We're imperfect. We come on here to discuss things, and we are super excited to come here and to talk about things with you today. And if you're watching this, bless you. I hope you're having a great day or have had a great day. And if not, that's okay too. Not all days are going to be great. And I hope things look out for you in the future. I don't know where this is going. I don't know what I'm doing right now. I'm just talking. Welcome to Calling from the Wilderness. We are
on.
This is for some background, we're going to introduce our guest here in a second, but our guest Kyle was recently camping on the edge of a cliff, and I feel like we've just together gone over that cliff with Derek. So welcome to the show.
A beautiful thing.
Yeah, that movie Hot Rod where he does that dancing on the hill and then he falls down the cliff and it goes for 6 minutes straight. He's just him falling down the cliff. That's us this morning, and I wouldn't change a thing. Anyway, so we're doing Calling from the Wilderness. We have a special guest, but before we get to him, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Tim Miller, for those that don't know. He is in London, England. He is an Anglican priest, and he has a giant lip ring and some tattoos, which I absolutely love. Tim, the amount of times I've shown people pictures of you with your tattoos and your lip ring and all dressed up. I don't know, in the robes and stuff, and I'm like, this is my friend. Look how cool my friend is, that he's in the Anglican High Church and he's got all this stuff on. I know him. It's just been amazing.
I wish I could be that cool in my own presence.
Yeah.
As long as somebody in the world loves me, that's all that matters.
My coolness has gone up in people's eyes because of your coolness and my relation there. And as a special guest, we have the lovely Kyle Lomenda, who is in Strathmore, Alberta. Kyle was also in Bible school with us at Full Gospel Bible Institute, and then Full Gospel Bible College, and then Eston College. I think all while we were there. Changed the names, and we are just excited to have him. Kyle, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I'm 35 years old, recently single. As Tim said, I just got back from camping, and I like the outdoors, but I like sleeping indoors. So I've been the youth and worship pastor at Strathmore Full Gospel here in Alberta for the last 11 and a bit years. And it's been a journey, but it really has been a blessing. And I mean, when we were in Bible school, I never ever would have thought that 15 years later, I'd be sitting here with the two of you, and all three of us would have been in ministry for X amount of years, especially myself. But it's
actually Derek, and I would have understood.
Well, maybe it was applicable to all of us, but no, especially myself. And so I'm just excited to be here to reconnect with you guys, and it's too long between visits and talks, as always.
Yeah, none of us got into cults. None of us ended up in a cult, so that's pretty cool. That I didn't think that was going to happen. It's exciting.
I think the problem is that none of us were successful in leading a cult, so we had to go and follow somebody else, right?
That's our make it rich plan, is to go into prosperity gospel or cultism.
I was just about to start, and then COVID hit, and it just it's all dried up, right? It's all dried up.
I love it. Kyle, one of the questions we like to ask our guests is, do you have any piece of advice that you have found helpful in your life and journey that you would like to pass on, or has no one ever given you any advice and you just fly by the seat of your pants?
Well, I've gotten lots of advice, and I mean, the Lord knows I need it. But I think one of the things that stuck out to me the most was actually not a piece of advice in itself. It was actually somebody holding me accountable, and out of that, I learned something. I remember in my second year of school, you guys were both there in Eston. In my second year, I decided that I liked the social aspect of Bible college better than the academic aspect. And so I was sleeping through a lot of classes and failing all those classes. And one morning, after I had continued my sleep rather than gone to class, one of our professors, Brian Tisdale, came into my room, knocked on my door. He came in and just kind of asked me what I was doing. And he looked at me, and this is going to sound way harsher than it was, but he looked at me and he said, "My brother, you are dropping the ball." And something about that really sunk in. And so even though it wasn't a piece of advice, that's something that 15 years later has stuck with me to the point that I still have to realize that sometimes we need to self-assess the situation we're in, why we're doing what we're doing, things like that. And there's going to be times that you really are dropping the ball, but you're going to be able to move through and past those things. And I mean, honestly, I do wonder if he hadn't come. And it was so funny because I was in my PJs and he was in a full suit, tie and everything for some reason. He never taught like that. But that morning he was, and he came into my office and I sat there with my eyes half open and my hair all over the place. And yeah, he called me out on my lazy, lackluster lifestyle. And it stuck with me, and it's been a little bit of motivation. But so it wasn't advice that he gave, but the advice that I took from that was that no matter what state you're in at a current time or place, there's always a possibility of coming out the other side. And I mean, look where we are today. We're all at the peaks of our ministry, and no cults, like Derek said. So I mean, we're killing it.
And yeah, I don't think I did. I used to get those Peter Popoff, like, those little prayer cards. You remember that in Bible school? I used to.
You had the felt hands that you put in between your hand, and then you stuck it in your wallet, and money was supposed to come. I remember you got miracle water shipped to you once. And
Oh yeah, and a meteorite and stuff. I used to write to or get those prosperity gospel guys to send me their little newsletters every month that had like a special little prayer thing in it to make me rich as long as I sent them money first. Not that I believed in that stuff. It was just really funny to see all the creative things that they would come up with. And so I think that's probably the closest I've been to a cult. But that's going to go down a road that we probably shouldn't go down. Speaking of cults, no, I was going to go into that.
What Derek was meaning to say is we're looking at Samson.
Yeah. Here's the Philistines. I guess it's not cults, religion. But anyway, let's get into it. So if you guys are joining us for the first time because Kyle is here and you wanted to see his beautiful face and get to see him, then let me walk through what we do. We have a passage that we like to look at. It's usually not a super popular passage. We like maybe the more obscure ones that aren't really read a lot or preached on a lot, and we just talk about it. And we believe that in this discussion, this taking time to look at the small things, we can learn, we can grow, and we can work together, journey together in our faith. And as we share opinions and what the Lord has been putting on our hands, in our heads, we can grow. So let's get into this. Today we're reading Judges 13, parts of it, because it's a long chapter, about the birth of Samson. Tim, do you want to start us off?
I'm happy to. Very happy to. So Judges 13, verses 2 to 5 and 19 to 25. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, you are barren, and you have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it on a rock to the Lord, to the one who works wonders. And Manoah and his wife were watching. And when the flame went up towards heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord went up in the flame of the altar. Now Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell on their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and to his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, We shall surely die, for we have seen God. But his wife said to him, If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us all these things, or now announced to us such things as these. And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in Mahane-dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol.
There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Therefore, be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, to the one who works wonders. And Manoah and his wife were watching. And when the flame went up toward heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord went up in the flame of the altar. Now Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell on their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. And Manoah said to his wife, We shall surely die, for we have seen God. But his wife said to him, If the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands, or shown us all of these things, or now announced to us such things as these. And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in Mahane-dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol.
All right, Tim. Any word or phrase that jumped out to you?
So there's two. The one phrase that jumped out to me, which I love, is they made the offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, the one who works wonders. That was a fantastic description. And the other thing, which I was just struck with as we were reading, is that Manoah's wife is never named.
You stole mine.
Always referred to as woman or wife. I find it so fascinating. So those are the couple of things that jumped out at me.
And I read the chapter last night, and in the whole chapter, she's never mentioned by name. It's always the wife or woman. It's that jumped out to me too. Anyway, Kyle, how about you? Anything?
Yeah, I like this. I like this kind of portrayal almost of like it's almost like a sitcom family system. Like the angel appears to the woman first, and then appears to Manoah and his wife, and then disappears. And Manoah, the husband, is like, "We're gonna die because we've seen God," and the woman's kind of like this calming sense of stability, and she's like, if we were going to die, why would he have told us all this stuff? Why would he have accepted this offering? And it's funny that she remains unnamed, but she is almost the most steadfast of characters in this chapter, kind of bringing that rationale and reasoning to, I mean, it's a pretty chaotic situation. It's not something that happens to me on a daily basis by any means, but
every second week.
Yeah.
Typically, yeah, give or take.
I like what struck out to me was that she's never named, and I just thought of maybe a reason why, but we'll talk about that later. And then also and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines, like just to begin. He's not going to do it completely, so it's almost foreshadowing, his messing up at the end of his life there. So, okay, so questions. Tim, do you have any questions that pop up out of this passage?
Um, yeah, I think like going off of what you've just said, that kind of question, which is like, is this like a looking back and describing the situation after Samson has lived his life, or is this like a prophetic voice that ends up being the shape of his life to come? And that kind of question about kind of what goes on in the midst of that, and then to like this whole thing about the unnamed woman and the stupidity of Manoah, I think it's just a fantastic place to sit in for a while. So those would be the couple of things I'd go into.
Yeah. Kyle, any questions or things that jump out?
I've always been interested by the story of Samson because I mean, his story is 3 or 4 chapters here in Judges, like his entire life cycle. And if you continue reading in through those, you see really that like he was born specifically for the fact that God wanted to enact justice on the Philistines, right? And so seeing this kind of story unfold about how his birth was foretold. I mean, he was born of a barren woman, and the angel of the Lord appeared. I mean, it's such a weird circumstance. And not every baby that's born comes out of a situation like this, but I always found it interesting, and I wonder why specifically the Nazarite kind of the way that he follows this kind of Nazarite creed, no razor shall come upon his head. Like I kind of understand the no drinking of strong drink or eating clean, kind of preparing yourself in that way. But I always thought the not cutting of hair at all. I don't know if that was just foreshadowing for later with Delilah and having his hair cut in that way, or if there was something more specific to it. But yeah, I've always wondered about that. I found that very interesting.
The question that comes out to me is lately, I've been trying to see God at work in places that I don't normally would look to see God working. And there's been lots of times where I look back on an experience, or someone has changed their life, or repentance or restoration or something, and then I look back and I see God's hand at work. And I'm trying now to see it before that big moment. Like, what's God doing even before that giant moment? And so this story kind of reminds me of that, because like the angel comes to them, says this is going to happen, and they kind of don't believe it, and so they get the angel to come back, and he says it, and the angel's in their midst. But it wasn't until he took off that they're like, oh, that's God, and they bowed and they're like, we're gonna die. Like, they're this guy's um who they don't know comes and tells them they're gonna be with child. So obviously they hold him in some kind of high regard to believe him, and so there's that. But then it's not until he goes up in the smoke that's like, ah, that was God. And so I can see myself in this, where I'm looking, I'm like, oh, there's something going on here. But it's not until the big moment happens that I go, oh, that was God. That was a holy moment. That was a special time. So that's kind of the question. It's not really a question. It's more of a start the timer. We'll get going kind of thing.
Got it. Got it.
Got it. So that's, yeah. So that's kind of, yeah, what jumped out to me in this story. I wonder. Okay, all right. So my idea on why the woman isn't named is, I wonder. Like, I heard somewhere that in stories, if they don't put names on characters, um, or they're specifically vague about a character, you are supposed to imagine that character as yourself. Like, it's a lot easier to see yourself as that person. So I wonder if the author is intentionally doing something like that, so that we would see ourselves as Manoah's wife, that we have been barren in some way, and God has promised something to us and spoken to us, and we're still waiting. And and then even, and God's talking to us, and maybe other people don't see it or understand it, so they're trying to figure it out, and you're the ones that need to hold steadfast. And then maybe something doesn't happen, and everyone's like, oh, we totally did something wrong, and God's against us now. You go, hold on. Like, if he was against us, none of this would have happened. Like, this is, God is on our side. Maybe. I don't know.
Certainly is like a legitimate, as you say, like a legitimate kind of tool in both kind of writing and interpretation. That invitation, that kind of, as you say, when the description or the personification of is more vague, it's that invitation, because obviously a story that mimics this one or mirrors this one would be, Zechariah, Elizabeth, and John, but all the characters are named. Zechariah is somebody who has position in the community. You got and an elderly wife, not just a barren wife, but the elderly wife of Elizabeth. And there's kind of much more specifics. Whereas this one, we've got, Manoah, aside from his name and his inability to believe anything that comes out from anybody else's mouth but his own, is just, aside from that, we don't know anything about him. You've got this wife who may be young, may be old. We just know that she's barren. And where, as you say, where do you find yourself, and where do we kind of hear resonances of our own kind of lives and stories? And I do think, as you were talking, Derek, I think that's one of the things we probably don't spend enough time in within kind of Christian discipleship, is that sense of like, as people who are meant to be living new resurrected life, how many places and where and how often are we feeling more barren than born? And are we so focused on trying to be the kind of the resurrection story or the good news that we don't allow ourselves to recognize that sometimes we feel like an empty womb, or instead of the empty tomb kind of thing, like, and it is that part of the story, that invitation to say, it's okay when you find yourself in this place, because God is still faithful. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of take into context. I mean, you think about Samson, and the first thing that pops into your mind isn't the happenings and the situations leading up to his birth. Like I think of the jawbone of the donkey, or the lighting of the fox's tails, or the bringing down of the temple. Like you think of all these great feats of strength that Samson did, but there was some specific stones that were put down in place leading up to those things. And I mean, even the angel came and gave instruction, and it was up to this unnamed woman and Manoah to follow that instruction and be obedient in that. And if they hadn't, would Samson's situation have been different? But yeah, to have the angel of the Lord appear, and anytime I think in scripture that the angel of the Lord appears, I'm intrigued, because it's always a very unique interaction. And yeah, like I said before, I love that Manoah kind of freaks out and he's like, okay, we're going to die. Like, this guy's gone now. We've seen the Lord. We're dead. No one can look upon him. And his wife's just kind of like, come on, man.
Yeah,
He wouldn't have done all these other things if he was just going to kill us.
And interesting, which we haven't caught, but I encourage people just to read the whole of chapter 13 of Judges when you get a chance. But it's not the wife who needs the angel to come back. She has the interaction with the angel, hears the promises, and that's her life's orientation now towards this unborn child. And Manoah is the one who's like, no, I need to hear this for myself. You probably got it wrong. That can't be right. And all the way along the way, she's just like, no, angel of the Lord, messenger of the Lord. And, we've just got to kind of walk that. And it actually almost is a strange kind of foreshadowing where, maybe foreshadow is not right, but we've got Samson's dad who never listens to a woman, and literally is kind of mansplaining the whole experience to her, and then you've got on the other side you've got kind of Samson who kind of has always got an inflated sense of his own masculinity and strength, and never actually pays attention to kind of his vulnerability to women, as it were. And there's kind of a key, interesting, like I think just kind of the plays between kind of the masculine and feminine, or male and female, that this passage brings up. So
yeah, I never even thought about that. But to be fair to Manoah, if I'm not married, but if my wife came to me and said, "Hey, an angel came to me and said this is gonna happen," I I would probably want to hear it for myself, just to just to make sure. Like nowadays, I'd be like, is there a way that I can hear this just so we're on the same page? And I don't know, maybe that's why I'm not married. I have to hear things for myself. I don't know.
you haven't heard God tell you who to marry yet, Derek. You
No,
just
no,
missed that.
no.
But yeah,
I
but
did
like,
when I was like 12.
He's been telling her,
so
but she hasn't told you yet.
yeah,
but I think
exactly.
but I think what's interesting about that though too is, and we get this a lot in the New Testament as well, and it doesn't always, but it almost always happens when it's a woman's testimony. Like, men just fail to believe the testimony of women, which is its own kind of issue in masculine recorded and written scriptures. But there's this thing about, like, we get so focused on the message, right? Like, we ask people, we question when somebody's like testimony is about what God has said. And we question the message and want to hear and engage with the messenger, instead of being like, so what, that question you were asking at the beginning, Derek, which is like, what is it about, and where is God in this, right? Like, so it's like, yeah, it's okay, the angel came, is this true, is this not, I'm not sure, but what is God doing in the midst of this is what I actually want to know, which isn't just the message, it isn't the messenger, it's the presence, it's the person, it's the relationship.
Yeah.
It was really, kind of challenging me to think about that a bit. So.
Yeah. And I think, Kyle, when you're talking about the long hair, I've always thought about it as a visual representation of being set apart as a Nazarite, like with the uncut hair, because everything else is kind of maybe not as public. Like, you just don't drink wine. Maybe people think that's weird, or not touching dead things. But I think the not cutting your hair would be a more, people would be like, oh, what's going on there? Oh, that's just a Nazarite, or something kind of to set them apart visually. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, that would make sense. I just wonder if there's more to it than that.
Well, probably.
It's always been a sense of interest to me.
Yeah.
So
No, I never think things through completely. So there's definitely more to that than my little set apart visually thing.
you're such a Manoa.
You're such a Manoa. That's the new word. Stop being a Manoa. Just believe me. Yeah,
But it's interesting though too. Is I was thinking about that. Is like that's the only kind of that's the only kind of physical description in the sense where we're kind of given about Samson. Like we build in this like super macho like World Wrestling Federation size a man with this enormous hair, but actually all we have he could have been like scrawny as all could be and just had a really big set of hair, right? Like but as you say, that kind of that sense of actually what we're given and then what we read into it, I think is really, really interesting too.
Does it not say later on that he had big muscles, or is that just something I've grown up with my whole life?
I think it's implied. I don't know that it is ever actually mentioned, but it's hard to imagine this guy like doing all the things that he did without just being like an absolute beefcake of a man.
But then that would be that the Lord's working through him more. If he's just the scrawniest guy and he's able to rip gates off and stuff, then you'd be like, oh, there's something going on here. That's the mom lifting a car off a baby kind of strength. But he's got it all the time.
Yeah. But I think that's the interesting thing too about at least as you're saying, Kyle, like we only have kind of, I think it's the 4 chapters of the whole book, which in a sense, we got his birth, and then we kind of got a few years of his adult life, or and the question is, the same way we ask often about like what was Jesus doing in those 30 years before kind of public ministry, and I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Is like there's this implication with Samson that it's the Spirit at work in Samson that gives Samson his strength, as compared to he was just a man who walked with an absolute air of strength and power, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking right now, like the story of Samson, he was told, the angel told his mom this and his dad. So I assume he grew up believing this, like, why can't I have wine? Why can't I touch dead things or whatever? Why can't I cut my hair? Oh, it's because you're set apart. And so that in his uprising, he's always believed he's been set apart or called to a special purpose. And although it may have made him cocky and arrogant in some ways, he definitely believed that he was set apart or something like that. So do we not feel that we are set apart or called to a higher purpose? And do we live that way, that we go into situations going, okay, if God is in me, how can God affect this situation through me? How can I speak life or bring peace or whatever to this situation? Like, do we just go in like we're normal, like we're not having the Spirit of God in us? I wonder how our lives would change if we had the kind of purpose, more mindset that Samson had growing up. Not to sound like we're arrogant, like, oh, we've got God in us, so we are the ones that are going to change. Like, God's working in all things, but it's that certainty or faith or whatever you want to call it in these situations that we can bring about God's kingdom in certain situations.
I think you're right. I mean, it is easy to forget that we are, as Christians, called to be set apart and act upon in a way that it is holy. And maybe it's just because we don't have this kind of superhuman strength. Our giftings and callings are in different areas and ways, and sometimes we may not even know we're acting in them until we're in the midst of them. um, our abilities don't necessarily stick out the same way that Samson's does. I've never carried a city gate up the hill and just planted it there for no reason. I mean, you are an absolute beefcake, don't get me wrong, Derek, but
Yeah.
I mean, you're known for so much more than that, right? So
I think the only thing I successfully destroyed in our college days in the basement gym of the dorm was my jeans that I tore basically in two after watching On Back and thinking I was going to be able to kick that punching bag off the chain. Having never done it before, I was convinced it was going to happen, and I just lost my favorite jeans that night. That was the. Yeah.
It happens. But I want to be clear when I'm talking about set apart. Like, I think we can take that to an unhealthy extreme where we exclude ourselves from certain activities or people groups or whatever it may be because we're like, oh, we're set apart, we're holy, we're better than that. That's not what I mean. It's the going in and like with your neighbor, like if they're having an issue, do I just go in and say hi and maybe that's what I'm supposed to do? But do I also go in and be like, okay, what is God wanting to speak to this person? Or how can I, as a spirit filled Christian, bring God's spirit of love, joy, peace into this situation? It's just a different mindset. But yeah, that On Back movie was unreal. It was fantastic.
But we have this very unhealthy obsession with something we were talking about before we were recording, which is a sense of, there's like this extreme sense of delayed gratification for Christian living, which is all about what you're building up in some eternal place. That when you get there, you hope your life's been good enough that you get the crowns, the mansion, you get to walk those streets of gold, whatever it might be. And there's that kind of that sense of, especially if you're feeling kind of like belittled or mocked. It's just like, yeah, but I'm set apart. Like this is like, you wish you could be as special and holy as me. And as you say, there's like that really unhealthy sense of it. I guess that's the, one of the things I wonder is like, had Manoah never kind of heard the message here, how differently might Samson have been raised if it was just his mom who believed that, she was investing in him as somebody who God loved and God was wanting to work through in a way that his vocation was different than the other Israelites of that time. And as you said, Derek, there's that interesting thing that he's not told that he's going to be someone who will save Israel. He's someone who shall begin to save Israel. And so there's almost like the sense of, where it's not the complete picture, it's not the complete story, but he has a part to play. And even his part in the 4 chapters is so much more narrow than a lot of the other judges who have like massive scope, over the whole Israelite army against the world kind of thing. And there's that question, I think, about how do we see and answer that unique vocational call in ourselves or see that in other people and encourage and nurture that in a way that again draws them, as you say, into that place of seeing every moment kind of just infused with the work of the Spirit, and those opportunities to be a part of, love, joy, peace, and patience, and all that, good stuff. And do we, I guess that's the question, is like, have we been so influenced by culture that we think set apart needs to be something of stature as compared to set apart to do something that somebody else can't do, whether anybody ever sees it or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been coming to the realization, I think especially during COVID, that the set apart is more about in dark places or negative or depressive places bring in hope and joy and peace, where everyone's super down or negative to bring some positivity to, if everyone's fearful to bring some hope. That set apart is more along those lines than, hey, I'm gonna go to heaven and get crowns there. Come with me and I'll give you some kind of thing.
Well, and I think set apart speaks also to how precious and valuable something is. Like not everything that's set apart is the best and the shiniest of something. But we can hold things that are precious to us that would have no real significance to somebody else, but we would take that thing and set it apart. And so even if we're not this Samson-like character, in our everyday lives, the things that we're going through, there is still this element of in having been set apart, we're reminded of how precious we are, and how that plays into that. But yeah,
I think that's for me one of the sad things of Samson's story is even the characters of his parents are fairly ancillary, and he does so much by himself, and there's this kind of this sadness. I think actually, I used to aspire to such greatness, to be the one person who could stand up against a whole other people and see God's people set free. But actually, for me, there's that real sadness, and actually it goes back to what you were showing at the beginning, Kyle, which is that the richness of the church and the richness of being a part of the body is that we do it together. And those places where we find ourselves alone or let ourselves believe that we are alone or can do it alone are the exact places where God has not called us to be. And and you just think and feel for Samson some of these times. It's like he's later on in his life, he spends so much time just like aspiring to be recognized, whether it's by women or other people in the community, and you never get a sense like there's anybody around him, and whether that was his parents who were like, no, you're special, and or it was like his own kind of sense of arrogance, or just could just be life, right? Like sometimes you find yourself alone, not because of any choices you've made, but because of things that have happened and chosen around you. But that kind of that sense of like, what how do we how do we kind of push back to say, we're not meant to be alone. We're not meant to take this journey by ourselves, and we're not meant to feel like it's got to be our strength that can pull down the city gates, when actually we could maybe pull down the those gates of darkness with other people.
And he had some major lady problems too.
yeah.
Like his first wife betrayed him and then was given away, and then the woman in the city, and then Delilah, who he fell in love with, stabbed him in the back too. Like,
and his mom been pumping him up, unrealistic expectations. That woman, the wife,
the unnamed woman.
Yeah, that, like, I don't know if any other story is that intentional about not naming a key character in the story. Like, I'm trying to think about it, but this is the only one that you can tell it's intentional. Like, it's never mentioned the name. And she's mentioned a lot, but never by name. Yeah. Anyway, I assume that's 20. We've gone past.
I was just gonna say, if anybody has any last minute thoughts as we wrap up, we've hit time. So
yeah. You guys go first. Let me think. No,
go ahead, Kyle. Anything you want to throw in at the end?
Oh, I don't know. Samson's great, but I love you guys. I think honestly, when we're talking about like, I don't want to completely derail stuff, but it is a real blessing as somebody. I mean, I've been in the ministry now for over 10 years. And to be able to look back on good friends from my past and see, the things that the Lord has done in both of your lives, and it helps me to recognize a lot of those things that the Lord has done in my eyes, and maybe in my life, and sometimes those times where you did feel alone and whatever, but to come to a culmination 15 years later after we meet, to be sitting on a podcast just discussing the Bible and Samson and the woman, whatever her name is. I mean, it's just a blessing to me to be in this kind of place. So I don't know. I love you guys.
That's that'd be an unreal T-shirt. Samson's great, but I love you guys like that. I just think that'd be the best T-shirt ever.
Okay, you and Popoff can sell those.
Yeah. Samson's great, but I love you guys. Yeah, and I think that's coming back and talking and even having this podcast as an opportunity to catch up with individuals is fantastic, and to show that we're not Samson. We're luckier than Samson because we, like Tim was talking about, we're not doing this alone, and we are together. And I wonder what Samson, if it wasn't just the beginning of the liberation of Israel, but it would have been a complete if he would have had more people to join him, to join his cause and say, we're gonna set people free. We are in the business of redemption, and we live in a world where we can do that from different provinces, different countries, that we can come together and share. And if COVID has taught us anything, I think it's the importance of communication and staying in touch with people and realizing that you're not alone. You're part of the group, and what you're going through, I'm going through, and my celebrations are yours, and your celebrations are mine, and we're together. We're the body of Christ, and the body isn't separated.
And what Kyle said can fit on the front of the shirt, and what Derek said most definitely cannot fit on the back of the shirt. See the corresponding card for further details. Yeah.
On the back, I'll just be like, "Just kidding, believe in Jesus." And so
every shirt comes with a free book.
a free book.
So we'll get everything in there. Don't worry.
That's right.
Pop-up book.
Well, let's close, and I think just that sense. Let us commit to be a people who travel together, who hold each other accountable, who seek the good things of God in every place of the world, and be people of redemption, especially in the darkest of places within our own lives, so that we can also proclaim that grace in others as well. So,
amen.
Go well, my brothers.
Amen.
Carry on.
Thank you for joining us, Kyle. It's been really good.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You can come back anytime you want.
You'll regret saying that.
I can always close you out of the Zoom. Yeah,
that's true. I don't know why I'm on constant mute mode anymore, but
all right. Blessings. I'm gonna end this. We can keep talking after, but blessings.
Peace.
See you.